Hi, my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, November the 21st, and it is a cloudy, gray, chilly, oh my goodness, it's winter day. Still filming here at the moment. Yes, I found another one of my lovely warm things, so I'm okay. If I could only find this in about 8 different colors, I think I'd be set, but I don't think that's going to be how I don't think I'm going to be able to find them in 8 different colors, but yeah, so we're filming here. I keep saying to myself, you really do need to figure out where your wintertime video location is going to be, but I haven't figured that out yet. So stay tuned. As usual, it could be in any one of a number of different places. With that, thank you so much for the comments last week, both on my Marnic design, and I hope some of you took the time to go and have a look at some of her designs, and for my great aunt's pettipoint picture. So unlike the last one that I inherited, that one is still sitting on the table waiting to be hung up in its stated location, so that's on my to-do list for this week. If you are a new viewer, this is a channel about cross stitch and the stitching that I've done this week. And if you're a returning viewer, I know that I try to say it every week, but I truly do appreciate all of you who like and subscribe and comment and return week after week. Even if you don't comment, I truly do appreciate all of you who come back to tune in and see what I'm doing on my stitching in any given week. And with that, okay, so I have a random few topics to talk about before we get into my very limited stitching for this week. And then we've got the topic as usual. But last month when I was doing the Cottage Garden Samplings Halloween Sampler, as I do every month, I do sort of a random assortment of patterns from that particular designer. And I showed the Peace on Earth sampler from Cottage Garden Samplings. And if you haven't, if you don't follow or don't watch Kindred Stitcher, she's been stitching that up, and it is stunning, 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 stunning. As she's made progress, I've been watching it as she's been stitching it, just going like, ugh, I want to start it. Ugh, I want to start it. Ugh, I want to start it. It's really, really lovely. So Kindred Stitcher, she has a YouTube channel. I will link to, I think it's her most recent one is the one where she showed her finish, but I'll confirm that. But I will put a link to her YouTube channel. She's also on Instagram. I feel like she stitched it up in about 3 days. In my head, I think it actually took longer than that, but in my head, I feel like she stitched it up like nothing. It would take me 3 months. That's a whole different kettle of fish, but whatever. If you want to see it, if you want to see what it looks like actually stitched, it's like I say, I've been watching her stitching it and just going like, ugh, I want to haul it out. I want to stitch it. I want to stitch it. She made a few changes in it, but the interesting thing is when the words Merry Christmas are in sort of a banner below the house on that one, and I know I didn't bring it down to show you, but I laughed because where did I put that? Oh, there it is. She changed the silk that she used for that to one that is not called for in the pattern, and it looks lovely. It looks lovely. And so she said what it was, and I, in my head, went, I'm pretty sure I have some of that in my stash. So she changed it to Gloriana Arnhem Heath. Oops, there we go. And it looks like this. So when you look, looks like this. I don't think you can see it at all. Let's pull this out. So it's surprisingly green and blue and mauve, which if you were looking at that sampler, you would go, that doesn't really go with how that piece looks. But surprisingly, it looks fantastic. And in fact, I made a comment on one of her Instagram posts going, okay, thank you for sharing that. I am now immediately going into my stash and pulling it and putting it with that piece so I can remember when I go to stitch it. So I have pulled it out of the stash. I have not quite gotten it into the correct bag, so I can remember, but it looks stunning. So if any of you are interested in that Kindred Stitcher, it looks fantastic. Okay, last week we're gonna talk about Sampler of Stitches by the Drawn Thread, the stitch along that I am starting on January 1st with several other people. And I made a comment about getting the metallic, and I got comments in saying, what metallic are you talking about? So I very late this week did send in an email into the Drawn Thread to ask about this, but for those of you who have recently bought the charts, your pattern does not show this. So I do have the question into the Drawn Thread because it could have been, like I say, I have an early version of these charts as opposed to some of you who would have recently bought it. And so just to show that I am not, that I'm not making stuff up, see, Bijou Metallic 413 shows up on my very first chart. Now, it only shows up in that one chart. So a couple of you have reached out to me and said, what's going on? Now, your charts say that you don't need it, and I think the combination you have is the dark mauve and the light mauve for that particular section. I think it's only used in one of the specialty stitches there. So I wouldn't worry about it. If your chart says light mauve, dark mauve, go for it. Like I say, I've got an email into the Drawn Thread just to clarify. You know, is it going to make a dramatic difference? No. So none of you need to worry about the metallic. I'm still contemplating having my LNS order in the Bijou Metallic. I'm going to wait and hear back from the Drawn Thread and then make my decision at that point in time. But I have bought Soie d'Alger this week and picked it up for my LNS for where I am heading in terms of my colors. So I thought I would show that to you. I don't know that there's a few colors I'm still debating, and we'll talk about it as we go through it. But I thought I would show you where I'm at so far on my palette. So the funny thing is, in this, you know, conglomeration of charts, which I've had for quite a few years, the funny thing is when I bought the series of charts, because one of my LNSs at the time was actually running a class, which I did not participate in, I bought the series of charts and I did buy fabric. So the fabric that I bought was Silvery Moon linen. I think even then I got 32 count. Yeah, silvery 2 count Belfast linen. So I bought it at the same time because even then I didn't like the color that was being called for. So there's Silvery Moon. And since then, as I said last week, I have made a firm decision on my fabric that I'm using for this. So I've gone even darker. So yes, I have this big conglomeration of things here. So I am going to my default gray, which is 32 count Pearl Gray Lugana. Actually, I just left. Sorry, I just put all these silks in a little row on top of the fabric that I want to hold up beside it. So what can I say? Okay. Because I don't think the colors, there you go. Right. So there's Silvery Moon. And I think I chose it because when I was looking at the called for would have been a little too yellow, brown, whatever it was. It would not have been my color. So I think I took, because the called for was a pale, I went with a pale gray because I always go gray is better than anything that's in the brown or yellow tones. So I picked the pale one. And again, while I've been pulling these colors, and again, having had a little bit of a chat with Jeanette about this particular one, where she's going, I wish I had chosen a darker color. like I say, even as soon as she said it, I went, that probably, yeah, I think that's right for me. Now again, if you like the way it looks and you like it on the palette, that's fantastic. Everybody's aesthetic is different and it's totally fine. Your piece is your piece. Do it on any color fabric you want. I am choosing for myself to do it on this Pearl Gray Lugana. Now, I think I am going to keep them side by side as we're going through this little exercise, just because you can see how it can look on both. I still reserve the right to change my mind, although I really don't think I'm going to, because I'm quite sure it's going to end up on this. Silvery Moon does also come in a 32 count Lugana, so I can switch that too. All right, so here we go. Here we go a little bit. Let's make this a little bit longer. There we go. I don't know how well this is going to work out at the end of the day, but we're going to try it. Okay. So first off are the blues. So my dark blue is going to be 14, I don't know that you're going to be able to see any of these numbers. 1435, 1436, 1436. And my light blue is going to be 1714. Good grief. I don't know why it's having such a hard time. There you go. Barely. Anyway. Going to turn out to be hard, I can tell. So it's, again, my typical default, I go towards a very dark navy. Now, don't kid yourself. I do have another blue combo that I debate, but I keep going. I do like a navy blue, and I think this will work. So those are my blues. My greens are 1845. I'm not going to bother holding it up because it's too hard to get it to sit in the, anyway, you know what I mean. 1845, and the light one I'm using is 1843. There you go. Now, as I mentioned before, the taupe, which I didn't really like the taupe on the called for fabric, but I actually really like it on the Pearl Gray. So the taupe that is called for 3345 is staying the same. Yeah, having a hard time here. Let's see if when it all goes crashing into the floor, nobody be surprised, right? Blows it out, but that's okay. So there's the taupe. As I said before, whoops, see, told you it was all going to go flying. The darkest of the mauves is also staying the same, which is 4636. So a lot of you are doing it with the NPIs, which is good too. What I started with when I was doing the conversion is I did the Soie d'Alger, because there's an NPI list and a Soie d'Alger list, and I started with the Soie d'Alger and started changing from there. So this is the darkest of the Soie d'Algers that is called for, but then the next two up from that are actually in a different color family. So I thought it was very interesting when they were moving up that they actually moved color families, and I didn't like that. So the next, technically, if I were truly matching it up, the next two up would actually leave a little bit of a gap, and there would be a light one and an even lighter one. So I stayed in the same color family and got 4633 and 4631. But it's me, and I've always debated whether I'm going to like how these two, if I'm going to like that combination, or if I'm going to like a little, if I would have preferred choosing a medium. So again, I'm going to have this color family in my bag ready to go for January 1st, but as I'm choosing between the light mauve and the very light mauve that's called for in the chart, I will probably be deciding by specialty stitch and how it's being used, which combination I really want to use. So while I was there, I also picked up the medium so that I have the color family from 4633, 4634, 33, and 31. I don't remember if there's ones in between there or not, but c'est la vie. I think I need to get myself bigger clips. Okay, so those are my mauves. Now it does call for a cream, and being the usual indecisive person that I am and like having options and possible variety, I have picked up 3 grays. So again, so I now have more colors than are called for, which is not surprising for me. Just so that, again, same thing, so that as I go through the specialty stitches and decide, I have the option of deciding what I want. So I have this very light gray, so it's not a white, it is a gray. So if I want it to stand out on my pearl gray fabric, it will stand out. I have one which is 3222, which looks like it will blend in. So if I really want a very tone on tone perspective, that's what I would use. If I want it to stand out on my pearl gray, then I would go with this darker one, which is 3224. The lightest one is 3221. So again, so 3 grays from a family. And of course, the thing that's missing is the yellows, which I'm still struggling with. So I bought these 3 and brought them home. I don't know that these are my final decisions. So I brought 4234, 2544, and 3815, which I think is one of the called fors. So I'm just going to hold this back, try not to let them all go falling over. So I think, again, the lights are blowing this out, so it practically looks white. So I still go, this color palette will work either on Silvery Moon or on Pearl Gray, but I am truly leaning towards the Pearl Gray. And go. So that's what it's going to look like. That's sort of the color palette. Ooh, good. On Pearl Gray, 32 count Pearl Gray Lugana. So I need to cut my official piece of this. This is actually some leftover. And I was looking at it going, and you can, and I can't. I've used it for several things, and I've kind of got to that point where it's not big enough. I'm gonna have to cut into one of my bigger pieces, which I don't know about you. I always kind of go like, I like having a big piece of fabric, and cutting into it sometimes is a little. But I have a lot of this in the house, so I should not be ridiculous. So that is where I'm at on my color palette. So I'm just going to put these into the bag, cut my piece of fabric, serge it, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm calling it, then I'm ready to go for, that's not true. I have two other things I need to show. The Soie Perlee and the Soie 103 that are called for. So just so you know, in case you're ever changing colors, the numbering system between Soie Perlee and Soie 103 from Access Commodities, those two lines share color numbers between them, right? So if you have a Soie 103 that's a specific color number, the equivalent to that in Soie Perlee is the same number. Now those numbers do not translate necessarily across the other silk lines that they have, so those numbers do not translate down into the Soie d'Alger range, although in my head I go, wow, wouldn't that have been really fantastic if that were true? So I picked up two Soie Perlees. So I've got Sarah, the Stitchin' Mommy. I'd left her a question last week, sort of said, since you got a kit from somewhere, and it did look like at one point in time that the Drawn Thread was offering linen and thread kits for this particular series. As far as I know, they are, from what I can tell on the website, they're no longer offering that. But it does look like at one point in time they were, because I think that's where it looks like Sarah got hers from. And so I'd asked her if she could talk to me about whether there were duplicates of any of the colors, because there was no mention on my charts whether or not you needed more than one skein of anything. So she came back and she said that there were two skeins of the darkest of the blues and that there were two spools of Soie Perlee. So I have one spool of each of these grays. So one of them is Soie Perlee 415. That's not going to stay up there. And the other one is Soie Perlee 712. Same thing, because I haven't quite decided, this doesn't show up quite correctly. Really what it's going to do, this is going to give you the tone on tone effect, and this is going to stand out a little bit more. So there is quite a bit of this. She's got two of them. I've got these two colors on order with my LNS. So I will still have, I have enough to start on January 1st. I have enough to go, as far as I'm concerned, quite a ways through this piece with what I've got. So I'm quite sure that I will get my second spools of this and the matching Soie 103s. I have the Soie 103, I think in 712, but I don't have it in the 415. So I've ordered that as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I think I'm good to go. Like I say, I still think the because I can't help myself, and it's always interesting looking at it in a camera, because sometimes it highlights different things. Sometimes the camera hides things, sometimes the camera illuminates things. So again, I still think that I could get away with it on the Silvery Moon if I made a last minute decision. But I'm 99.9% sure that I'm going to go with this Pearl Gray Lugana, just because I think the darker color, given that I've decided to go with more intense colors, will make the specialty stitches stand out. Anyway, hopefully this week, if I get my act together, which really means cut my official piece of fabric, get it serged, I should do my goal is to get a post onto Instagram, hopefully before the next video comes out, that shows these, so you'll be able to see all of these color numbers. I will put all of these color numbers in the show notes below in case you are wanting to confirm anything or if you have any interest. But that's sort of where my color palette is going. Yes, it's more colors than are called for, but you've watched my YouTube videos before, right? So you know that I always, if I can change or add, that's usually what I'm going to do, right? All right. Okay, so that, just the other table over. Okay, so that is my sampler of stitches discussion. Like I say, I've got a question into the drawn thread about the bijou metallics. If your chart doesn't have the bijou metallic on it, don't worry about it. Just go with what your chart says. It's all going to be fine. Like I say, I may get the bijou metallic. I may revert and just choose. It's me. Who am I kidding? Of course I'm going to get the bijou metallic because I'm going to want to try it out anyway. Okay, so that is sampler of stitches. Just in case you were wondering, so this is what all of it together looks like. And again, the SAL is a year-long SAL. We are kicking it off on January 1st. The goal of the SAL, and again, stitch at your own pace, get what you get accomplished, etc. Do all of those things. It's your piece, you do you. But theoretically, the goal is that if you do one letter, so this little block up here, then this one, and then this one, if you do one of those every 2 weeks, by the end of the year, this entire piece will be finished. And again, the theory is if you work on this project at that pace, it also should give you lots of time to work on other projects and participate in other stitch-alongs, or, you know, gifts that you're wanting to make, or whatever other stitching that you want to do. You can still fit a lot of that into your stitching schedule, and over the course of the year get a larger piece accomplished without feeling like you're working on this huge piece. And quite frankly, I'm planning on treating each one of these as a really great little finish. Got the letter A done. Woohoo! I'm going to try not to reward myself for that, but I'm going to call each of them like a little finish. Now, technically on this particular series, if you go at that pace, you will still have a little bit left to go because, you know, 52 divided by 2 gives you the 26. That's why we're going an alphabet challenge. Works really well in any given year. I don't know why I didn't think of it all by myself, but whatever. This, of course, has a 27th section here, which is where you put in your initials and the year that you worked on it. So in my head, I go, I'm hopefully going to work a little bit ahead so that I can make sure that I can have this done before the end of the year. Now, we're all going to have to see how the pace of this works, right? So we'll start on January 1st. January 1st is a Saturday. I will start this on January 1st along with my other previously determined New Year, New Start. So I'm going to have 2 starts on January 1st, which you will get to see where I get to on January 2nd, because that's Sunday, which is when I should be recording a video. So you'll get to see my 2 new starts, and we'll see how fast I work through this. Like I say, I'm probably my goal is to work on it every Sunday. So yes, I'm going to start it on Saturday the 1st because that's when the SAL is starting. But my goal is to work on this piece every Sunday to get these blocks accomplished, and then not work on it for the rest of the week, so that it really becomes my Sunday piece. I'll focus on this, I'll get stuff done, etc., etc. And hopefully we'll see how my pace goes. I can't tell you whether I'm going to be uberly successful at that, you know, 2 Sundays is going to be enough to do this. Check back later. That's going to be all revealed in 2022. If it works out that I get more than, you know, on a Sunday, by the second Sunday, if I've finished all of A, I'm going to move on. I'm going to keep moving on, even if it's moving a little ahead of things, because I go, there's always going to come a period of time, and hopefully, you know, 2022, now that more of us are vaccinated and some travel restrictions are starting to lift and things are starting to happen again, I too am going to be able to go away on vacation, and this is not going to be a piece that I'm going to want to take on vacation with me. Life gets busy, work, family, 12 other things happen. Things always come up, and so that's the, you know, if I start to move ahead, that's not going to bother me in the slightest. If by the end of January I've fallen far behind, that's going to worry me, because I'm going to have to figure out another plan. So stay tuned for 2022, how we work our way through that. There was a comment about someone was concerned. They'd been looking at the charts and they're going, some of these stitches look hard. This is, a couple of you have sort of said, some of the specialty stitches are making you nervous. And my answer is, step one, don't get nervous. There's a bunch of us doing this. So there should be a group of us on Instagram. The hashtag is #SOS2022Sal. Again, that hashtag is going to be in the notes below, for you to see what people are doing. And hopefully this is going to give us a community to talk about the specialty stitches and whether or not we're having difficulties, or if somebody's got tips and tricks about how to make certain specialty stitches easier than others. Right off the bat, even though we haven't started it, I'm just going to I was looking at one of them and sort of said, sometimes there are comments coming up. So one of the specialty stitches under A is Algerian eyelet. As far as I'm concerned, eyelets are not hard to do. But it's interesting watching discussions about how tightly you should pull your thread for your eyelets. And I'm just going to put this out here for any of you who are working on this one. You decide how much that opening for the eyelet you like. I know people who don't like it to be pulled really tight. They like a little bit of an opening, but not a really big one. And I know people that go, let's just pull it as tight as we possibly can and make that opening as big as you possibly can. The answer is, this is your piece. You get to decide. If you like your eyelets where it's kind of medium opening, or, whether it's a little bit of an opening or a big opening or anything in between, it's your piece. You make those eyelets the way you like them to look. There are quite a few stitches, again, as I've been looking through the charts, quite a few stitches that require pulled work, which means, so again, like an eyelet, that's really what I personally call pulled work, right? So you're pulling on your thread as you're making those stitches to pull that opening to create it. So it's up to you to decide how pulled a look you want for any of the specialty stitches. There was one stitch diagram, I was looking at it going, that's not how I do that stitch. And the answer is yes, there's a stitch diagram. And if it's new to you, you follow the stitch diagram, no problems. At the end of the day, I was looking at the stitch diagram, our stitches will end up looking the same, but I'm going to do them my way because I just to me, it makes a little more sense in my head how that works. But it will end up looking the same. So don't forget that. There can be different ways to approach some of these stitches. A lot of these stitches will be new to me. So a lot of the ones where it's like you're having to lay groundwork stitches and then do stuff over top of that, a lot of those are going to be new to me. And I'm probably just going to follow the diagrams because they have diagrams and they're numbered. So for me, it's a connect the dot only on fabric. So don't worry about the specialty stitches. We're all going to work our way through them. For sure, if you got questions on stitches that I've already done, feel free to ask me questions. More than happy to talk through that on my videos. Like I say, I'm planning for the videos in 2022. My expectation is that in the weekly videos, I will be talking about the specialty stitches that I will have done that particular week for sampler stitches. So, yeah, so don't worry about them. We'll muddle through together. It will work out. It'll be fine. All right, and with all of that huge, it's 35 minutes and I still haven't talked about in one iota of stitching that I've accomplished this week. So let's talk about the stitching that I've done this week, which is not a huge amount. I'm not even going to show you my temperature tree because I haven't done anything with it. I know, I am totally wishy-washy about what to do about my thread. So my my goal for myself this week is just to make a decision. I need to stop being all wishy-washy and trying to decide. The answer is just make a decision and move on. So hopefully there's nothing to show you this week. I haven't pulled anything out. I haven't added anything to it. So I just need to make a decision so I can start actually working on that piece and getting some movement on that. Wouldn't that be great? So the only piece that I worked on this week is, I'm already looking, I forgot to bring it again. So the piece that I worked on this week is my Marnic Designs Remember November. I love how this looks. Love how it looks. So I have made reasonable progress this week. I'm actually just looking at this going, what exactly did I have last week? I don't remember. I think I had some of this done, but it wasn't quite complete anyway. Well, I was really trying to have all of the vines down here on the bottom finished, and I didn't quite get that done. So I just need to, so there's a little bit, there's more over here. So tonight, my goal is to sit down and finish the vines over here. Really what I've been doing is I've been pulling, because the majority of the symbols used here for the poppies are blended threads, which means one strand, so for example, one strand of 321 and one strand of 3801. So really so I've cut all of my threads the same length. I pull, the one strand of 321, the one strand of 3801. I stitch that symbol as much as I can till I run out of thread. Then I do a strand of vines. Then I come back and then I usually pick another symbol, pull that and do that. Because really I was trying to get, one of the goals was to make sure. So all of the cross stitching for this particular poppy is now complete. This open part, which has no stitching in it, those are French knots. I know. I don't necessarily love doing French knots. I don't necessarily hate doing French knots, but there's quite a bit of space in there to fill in. So that's hopefully later this week, towards the end of this week. Again, so I think I'm going to try to, I'm going to try and finish up all of the vines down here and work on this next big poppy, because this is the other one. All of these very dark centers here, here, and here, those three all require, those are all filled in with French knots. So I have, this one is ready to go. It needs its French knots. I need to finish this one because this is the other one that has a center of French knots. And then I have quite a bit of work left to do to get this poppy in. So check back next week. I really love how this is coming along. When I was looking to see if Marnic Designs has a hashtag, and they do, they don't have a ton of pictures on there, but somebody actually posted their completed Remember November. And they had it framed in a lovely frame, and they had set up a display for Remembrance Day that had pictures of her family in their military uniforms, and it was really lovely. And she had actually gone in and stitched the initials of two of her family members who had served in World War II, because there is enough space here. So she actually filled it out and put two sets of initials here for family members of hers that had served. And I went, I have two family members that served in World War II. I can go ahead. I should do that too. So I went on this big, long, side trip to get a bunch of things all pulled together. And then it was interesting. I was looking at that display from the picture on Instagram and went, what I think I'm actually going to do is get this framed in a stand-up frame so it can just sit somewhere. And then not just have this necessarily be people who served in the military, but just people from my family who've passed away. So I'll have a little display of family members of mine who have passed away, with the sentiment still being the same, remember. So I think that's what my goal is now. So I've kind of walked myself back. I'm not sure I'm necessarily going to put the initials in here, but that's my end goal for this particular piece now. Yeah, I've kind of picked out a place in my home where I think it can sit and stay and, you know, gather the family photos and all that kind of stuff. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is, if you are looking for free alphabets, Lord Libidan on the internet has, I think it's 52 or 55 different free alphabets available. And the really great thing about the way they've got them categorized is that they've got them categorized by how big. I think the smallest is five stitches high, right? So it's really how tall do you want your letters to be? And so they'll give you several alphabets if you want it 5 stitches high, 6 stitches, 7 stitches. I don't remember what the tallest is, but I think it's a very a fantastic way to provide those, because you can look at something where you go, I want to add initials to whatever piece you're looking at, or you're trying to add initials and I need it to fill up space X. You'll know how many stitches that you have available. And so if you're, instead of trying to randomly look on the internet to find some options for alphabets, I like his categories because it's very specific about if you're looking for alphabets that are this tall. And I think that's really useful. So I will put a link to the Lord Libidan alphabets in the notes below, because I've used it before. I'm probably going to use it again. Because like I say, that's exactly where I went when I was kind of going, when I looked at this one, it's like, oh, I'm going to need a sort of a curly alphabet because I'm going to want it to go with the vines, and that's what she did. And then I went, I need to go to Lord Libidan and I need to look at his things. I just need to decide how tall it is. And then I went on another one. But anyway, so that's where it is. Let's see how much I get accomplished this next week. Compared to last week, I feel like I made a lot of progress this week because it now really is looking like something. Whereas last week it was not looking like a lot of somethings. But I do find I am moving slower on this. And I was saying to a friend of mine this week, I can't explain it. Like over the course of the month of October, I got all of that Halloween sampler accomplished, and you know, here we are at the 21st of November. I have not done my stitching for today. Here we are at the 21st of November, and that's all I've got done. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. All right, let's talk Stashquisitions because I have some of those too. So let's do the more randomy ones. So I did pick up some floss this week. Classic Colorworks Blooming Crocus and Shamrock. Yes, I'm just looking at how will I keep this somewhat organized. Picked up some Weeks Dye Works. I actually did pick up a couple of skeins of each of these colors, but I figured for you it's not going to make any difference. So I picked up, this is Red Pear, because this is the color that's used a lot in that Honeysuckle Manor chart that I showed last week. And because I was on a gray kick, I picked up, this is called Shepherd's Blue. And Battleship. Whoops, that didn't work at all. Battleship and Gunmetal. And then I also picked up Williamsburg and Brick. So all of these are from Weeks Dye Works. And the funny thing is, see, again, this is fascinating to me. In real life, these look so similar, but, well, from what I can see on the camera, it looks like this is a little bit darker. That's really interesting. I got them because well, it's funny. I think when I originally picked them up, I thought they were the same ones, but it turns out they're different. And so I picked up both of them because I went, this might give you really subtle shading, or you could end up using them and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I haven't decided. Okay, so those I picked up. My chart came in. Again, this is entirely Carolyn of the Attic Needlework shop in Mesa, Arizona. This is entirely her fault, because on one of their more recent videos, she showed her work. She's working on this particular chart, We Live in Hope, which she is doing as her remembrance piece for Barb of Blackbird Designs, who passed away earlier this year. Now, she has done a conversion. She's changed it all into silks. I haven't made that decision for myself, but hers looked fantastic. And again, it's one of those ones where I looked at hers and I went, how have you not paid attention to this chart? And again, I don't think this picture does it justice. And I should know, after years and years and years of stitching, I should know that not to rely on this. And the interesting thing is my Blackbird Designs stash of charts has upticked over the course of this year, predominantly with the passing of Barb, that people have kind of all jumped in saying, we need to work on our Blackbirds. We need to work on our Blackbirds. And so more Blackbirds are showing up on my Instagram feed. Brenda and Laura, the Serial Starter, of course, started their Blackbird weekends, so that the first weekend of every month is sort of a work on your Blackbirds and post it to Instagram. So I of course am following the hashtag, and I'm seeing all of these Blackbirds. So I of course have my Blackbird chart stash has upticked, quite frankly, because of that. And I've said it here on multiple occasions that when you see the models of things, very rarely do the pictures on the front of these charts do them justice. Although I will give credit to Marnic Designs. I think her cover of this and the reality are pretty good. That reminds me, we'll come back to this in a minute once we get through this. The other one that I picked up is Berry Blossom Sampler by From the Heart. Needle art by Wendy. I've been looking and looking and looking and looking at it, and I finally bit the bullet, you know, because no chart should travel alone. So, you know, I had to get two. So that one came home. Again, what can I say? House. Now, the called for fibers on this are all Gloriana silks. And Gloriana is... it's hard to get Gloriana these days. And I know that even for shops that have orders, they can place an order for whatever it is that they need or whatever their customers need. But when they get those orders, not 100% of it arrives. And that's happening a fair amount these days. Certainly with a lot of the over-dyed fibers. Some are better than others about their fill rates, but I certainly know from my LNSs that when they place an order, it is atypical for them to get 100% fill rates, which is what would have been happening before all of our supply chain issues occurred. So anyway, so it's all Glorianas, and so my real plan is that I will kit this up over time. Don't know how long it's going to take me, but I did pick up three skeins of Gloriana that my LNS had. So out of a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 out of 10 colors for this chart, my LNS had 3. And so now This isn't currently sitting in the 5-year plan, and plans are always meant to be changed or adjusted or adapted or whatever you want to say. So I'm not worried about that right now, because I don't know when exactly this is going to appear in the to be imminently stitched. But I'm going to work on it slowly and build my colors up over time. That's just how that's going to go. And again, with it being Gloriana, who knows how long that's going to take before that all comes together anyway. And it's not like I don't have anything else to stitch in the meantime. All right, so that's my Stashquisitions for this week. And now we're moving on to the topic. So if you are someone who has a lot of experience with fractional stitches, this may not necessarily be the topic for you. So if you're heading out now because you're like, I'm good with the fractional stitches, thanks for stopping by. I look forward to seeing you next week. If you're interested in hearing some versions of how to do fractional stitches, we're going to talk about that now. And the reason why we're going to talk about that now is, and I made mention of this last week, because there are a lot of fractional stitches in this particular piece. And again, so the interesting thing to me is things that are really obvious when I look at it in real life. So you can see a little bit of a line here. And that is, and again, so there are fractional stitches that are causing that line to be there. And we'll talk about why that is as soon as I start my drawing. Okay, so when you have a square, and you've got two symbols in there, there are options as to how you can work this. So one of the options, so normally if it was just A, you would come in and you would do, well, you would do a full X, whichever direction you end up doing them. So when it comes to one like this, I should have done it. One of the versions, I have to get all my colors ready. Let's see how we do without drawing on anything. Right? So you can come along and you can do the A, you can decide is the prominent one. Oh. Okay, that's not going to work either. You can't tell that those are different. Let's do red as the primary one. Okay. So you can come along and you can do A is the primary one, and you will do a little bit of a quarter, so just a quarter stitch into the center and then top it off with a full half stitch, which then you would come in with your B color and you would just top it off with another quarter stitch. Or you could decide that the B color is your primary, and you would do a full half plus a quarter, and finish off with a quarter stitch the other way. So that's for a square on the graph where it's just two colors, and what I normally do is I decide which one is the more predominant one. So which one do I want more of? And so those are the two options depending on whether you decide the A is the prominent one or the B is the prominent one. The other option, which is happening in the Marnic Designs one that I have, is sometimes you have these two symbols and this line is actually back stitching that is running in between them. And that's a case where I would come in and I do a quarter of A and a quarter of B, and then there's nothing, because then I'm going to use my back stitching color my back stitching color will fill it in. And so that's what's causing, so like in the piece that I'm currently working on, the reason why you've got this section here where you've got this line, this sort of what looks like it, you can see fabric through there. That's because there's all quarter stitches all along there, and all it's waiting for is the back stitching to come in and fill that in. And so it's going to end up being covered up, but it's going to end up being covered up by back stitching. Now, one of the other, so there's several options about how you do this. So one of the other things is I treat, if I've got a fractional stitch on the outside area, I treat it differently than if it's a fractional stitch on the inside. So, and particularly in this pattern, there's, you know, as you get those, as you're coming around those flower petals, there's clearly going to be a lot of fractional stitches to make those shapes. But, and this is also a chart that has, quite frankly, a lot of back stitching in it, right? So there is a lot of back stitching on there as well. But if I'm working on a fractional stitch on the outside where there's going to be back stitching, so let me draw another. So if I've got one where so let's pretend this is what's going on, right? So this is the outside, and then I'm coming into a part where it's just regular stitches. And this is a back stitching line, right? If it's on the outside, I actually do a full, I will do, apparently my red is having an issue. I will actually do a 3/4, I will do a 3/4 stitch on for that out one and still bring and back stitch around it. And the reason why I do that is because it gives more fullness to that stitch. Like, so if I were only to do a 1/4 stitch and then do the back stitching to do the outside edging of whatever it is, the flower, it wouldn't look as full. Yeah, so if it's on the outside, I will always do a 3/4 stitch, even if there's back stitching going around it, just because as far as I'm concerned, it fills it in more. Now, when I showed this originally and I was talking about my lovely, as I was stitching the remember, because of course these diagonals on the M's clearly are fractional stitches ad nauseum. And I did my first M and followed the chart as much as I, to my best of my ability. I finished it up and then I came back in and I did the back stitching and I was not happy. There was more fabric showing between where my stitching was and where my back stitch lines went. And so in that case, where I came in, actually I should see, can I point out any? No, you're never going to be able to see it. So what happened in that case is where I had those areas where like there's too much white showing through and I'm not happy with it. I went in with one strand of this dark gray color and identified those areas where I wanted them covered up and did a 1/1 full cross to fill those areas in. So I had already done my regular stitching, I had already done the back stitching, and then I came back in and I filled in some spots where I'm like, I'm not happy with that. So there were probably about 5 spots in this particular one where I actually came back in and went, I'm filling them in. I do know that there are people for where they really treat everyone where they go, that's a quarter stitch, that they come in and they do it. So they do all of their regular 2/2 stitching, and then they come back in after the fact and do all of these 1/1 quarter stitches to fill that in, because from their perspective, it fills it in better than a quarter stitch would. Again, this is a matter of personal preference. Now, like I say, on this one, I ended up coming back in and having to fill it in with 1/1 full crosses because there were gaps when I did my outlining. When I did my second M, because I had learned from the first one, I did a better job. And so when I did my fractionals, I made different decisions as I was doing this particular one. And when I came in and did my back stitching, I was totally fine with it. So now, as you're sitting there and you're looking at this on your screens, phone screens, don't forget, I'm telling myself, all of you are watching me on your phones. Don't forget that part. You know, as you're looking at this from a distance, there's no way that you have any ability that this one has some fill in with 1/1 full crosses, and this has none of that and has in certain places just single quarter stitches that were used to achieve the same effect. So what I'm saying is that I think either method works. You just have to decide what works best for your piece. You know, the reason why these 2 M's were done is because I didn't do my decision making on my first M didn't result in the look that I wanted, and so I ended up having to go back in and do something. My decision making on my second M, when I did the outlining, resulted in I was very happy with how it looked. And one of the areas that was very problematic for me is that as you came down to this point here in the M, right, so you've got this back stitching that's coming in at a very, quite frankly, a very steep angle to achieve that, where when you look at it, you go, there's no, like the decisions that I made in the first one was that there's no way that a quarter stitch will work, you know, because they're just coming in at too much of an angle, but it left me with too much white space. So the interesting thing for you is that, so again, let's pretend this is a square, but you've got something coming in at a very steep angle for back stitching, right? So when you look at that, you sort of go like, well, what am I really going to do in here? Like actually, so in real life, it was actually really even steeper than that. Like, what am I really going to do? So in the first one, I ended up doing 2 single 1/1 full crosses so that I could get it in there because I wasn't happy with how much weight was showing. In the second one, I didn't do either of that. I ended up using my regular 2 strands of floss and did a straight up and down to fill it in. So again, you get to make decisions on the fly depending on the shapes that are being created with it, what you're using it for, all those kinds of things. And again, I made decisions on this first M that when I did the back stitching, I came back and went, you're not going to be happy with that, and I had to come back in and do some filling in to make it look better. But because I'd done that when I got to the second M, I made different decisions. And like I say, so these 2 M's have been stitched, certainly these angled section on the M's have been stitched largely quite differently, but they've both achieved the same effect. And again, I'm making different decisions when I'm doing fractional stitches depending on whether it's inside one of these flowers, whether it's inside with back stitching, or if it's a fractional stitch that's on the edges of these. And so again, as you come down any one of these, like all of these angles over here, all of those are fractional stitches to achieve sort of this curved look around this flower. So I think that's part of the reason why I'm stitching slower than I normally do, is because I'm making these decisions, that I'm looking at all these fractionals and going, okay, so where's it being used? What do I want? Does it really justify why I haven't got more of this done? Probably not. But I do know that I am spending more time looking at these squares with multiple symbols to make the decisions about what I'm going to do. And again, there are different decisions that I make for fractionals that ended up around this opening here, because this is going to be filled in with French knots. So I'm making all of those decisions as I go along. So whether or not you do a 3/4 stitch, whether you do a 1/4 stitch, whether you do 1/1 full crosses at the end, it's your piece. You have to make sure that you're comfortable with how things look at the end of the day. But there are always multiple options as to how you achieve that. And it depends on whether there's back stitching or no back stitching, or where the back stitching is going. There are some symbols in the top part of those flowers where I go, I'm going to end up, it probably looks like it should be multiple quarter stitches that are combining to make it. There are certain areas where I said, I'm just going to do a full stitch, because there are colors that are similar, like they're the greens for the leaves. And I'm just going to let the back stitching ride right over top of a full stitch. And I'm not going to, some of them where it looks like it should be fractional stitches, I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to do full stitches and let the back stitching make the leaf. And I go, as we all know, on any given leaf, it's not like any given leaf is only one color. So, but again, even there, I'm making a decision as to how I'm going to approach how I see these symbols on my chart. So I know that lots of people, there are lots of people who don't like fractional stitches, and there's a part of me that goes, I'm not exactly sure why that is, because I don't find, they're not hard to do. You just have to make some decisions. So I think particularly about the Nora Corbetts that I've worked on and the Mirabilias, there are, particularly around the edges of those, you will see fractional stitches, because they're in the design because they're trying to achieve angles that are not just square, right? When you look at, I'm thinking, I call them the pixelated people, where it's like, you can always tell them where it's like full stitches, and there's nothing wrong. If all you like to do is full stitches, that's great. There are lots of designs out there for you too. But it does make them look very blocky, right? Because you can't have someone that has a little bit of an angle, you know, developed over a number of squares if all you're going to do is full crosses. It's a full cross, a full cross, a full cross. It makes it very, very angular, as opposed to trying to achieve usually some kind of roundedness or curve. And curves are harder to achieve on fabric where everything is in sort of these grids, right? So that's why fractional stitches come into play in designs. But if fractional stitches are not your thing, that's okay too. For me, I have no problems with fractional stitches, which is why I wasn't concerned about the fractional stitches in this one, because they're not hard to do. You just have to make some decisions. And I'm okay with the fact that I did my M, outlined it, and looked at it and went, okay, well, you're not happy with that. That is one of the realities of working with fractional stitches. I made my decisions as I was stitching it, did the back stitching, and went, not so much. I need to go back in and fix that. I didn't rip out any of the back stitching. Again, with 1/1 full crosses, you can sort of work those in, as long as you haven't pulled really tightly, you can work those in around what you've done. So I didn't rip out anything. I just, worked in these 5 or maybe 6 1/1 full crosses to fill in the sections. And at that point, because I had the back stitching, I knew where my issues were. And then of course, when I did my second one, because I'd had that, I also could go back and I could look at the other one and go, sorry, how did we end up doing this? What did we do there? Okay, that probably means I'm going to make a different decision on how I do my second one. And that's exactly what I did. So one of those M's has some 1/1 full crosses, and the second one has none. But again, at the end of the day, I think as far as I'm concerned, the two M's look exactly the same. You would never know that there's a difference in how I approach the fractional stitches until you got up close. And even then, I know there's a couple people I can think of where I go, like, even then I could see them looking, going, there is no difference, right? So again, it's a matter of personal preference, and how you do it and how you approach it is entirely up to you, your discretion, your piece, how you want it to look. So that's my very brief chat about fractional stitches. Hope that helps somewhat about what some of the options are. And with that, do my usual look around. I think I've covered everything I had to cover this week. So I hope you've had a good week. I hope you're going to have a good week. For those of you who are living in the United States and are planning on celebrating American Thanksgiving, I hope you have a really great Thanksgiving on Thursday. That means Black Friday, Cyber Monday is truly upon us. I'm laughing because Black Friday, Cyber Monday is also turned into a Canadian thing, even though we don't have Thanksgiving in November. But we too are having Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales. Some of them have actually, some of them started 2 weeks ago. We've been having Black Friday sales, I feel like, for weeks now. So it will be very interesting to see if there are anything dramatic happening for this Black Friday. I know I've seen sort of some of the articles written about some of the big chains that would normally have really big Black Friday sales, those ones where we read about in the paper where there's hordes of crowds and you have to line up hours and hours and hours in advance, and 12 other things, where I read those articles and going, I don't think there's anything that I would be willing to do that for. But a lot of my understanding from the articles I've been reading is that a lot of those chains aren't actually going to be having their typical Black Friday sales. In fact, they may be closed. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens for Black Friday this year. Supply chain issues are being felt all over. The postal systems are starting to feel some of their regular Christmas time pinches. I was watching the Sunshine Stitchers last night and had a little bit of a chuckle about poor Sheila. She participated in a smalls exchange where the parcel that was coming to her was sent out in November. And it has just arrived to her. Now, there was a little bit of an address issue on that, which makes things more complicated and all sorts of things. But I certainly know from some of the stories of people that I know of where it's my traditional thing going, I could mail 2 packages to 2 people who live in the same city, on the same street, 1 house apart. So I could take it to the post office at exactly the same time. It could arrive anywhere from like 3 to 6 weeks differently, or it could be like on the same day. It's anybody's guess with what's happening in the mail system, and I have no explanations for that. But as usual, we just need to be patient with things that are being shipped to us and ordering. Like I say, Gloriana's, I have no expectation that anytime soon I'll be able to finish kitting that up because it's Gloriana. I've gotten all the colors that I can for my LNS, and who knows when they're going to get their next shipment of Gloriana's, and who knows what's going to be in it. You know, I might be able to get a couple of colors from other places, but again, usually that means I'm dealing with a shop in the States and shipping from the States. I put anything into the cart that puts me into international shipping, and that gets interesting. So, you know, and for me, I'm in Canada, so the shipping for anybody who's in Europe or Australia or New Zealand or Africa or Russia, your shipping costs are even more. So dear Americans, be very grateful that your shipping is as fast and as economical as you can get it, because for the rest of us, it's not quite so friendly. There are lots of things. There are lots of shops that will ship to Canada, but you put anything into your cart. I know of one where it's like you put there's a few stores down there where if it's needlework, where you put one floss into your cart, the shipping starts at $15 US. That's where we start. You want one skein of floss, $15, and it goes up from there. So that's where you go like, yeah. Anyway, it gets a little bit interesting. Some of them are better than others. I know every individual company is making the best decisions for them. It is a business decision, and I totally get that. I, as a consumer, also have to make my own decisions. Anyway, big, long, circuitous talk. I'm going to come back and go, if you're celebrating Thanksgiving, have a really great Thanksgiving. I hope you have a great time. I hope you do take the opportunity to be grateful for things. I know sometimes it's hard to be grateful, but there are always things to be grateful for. And if you're gathering with people, please just be safe, be healthy. Healthy is very, very important these days. And whatever you do, I hope you find some time to do some stitching. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week. And I'll see you next week. Take care.